Hello and welcome to the Inspection Pit, Episode 2. Today we will be talking about the Pennsylvania Railroad's K4 462 steam locomotive. But before we start, just a couple things. For one, you might have been seeing that I've been uploading a lot of British content lately. Mostly this is just stuff that I can just do in my spare time and not have to worry about it. I'm working on a special video for the channel. I'm not going to tell you guys what it is yet, but it's going to be my 100 subscriber special. I know it's going to be a bit late, but whatever. Anyway, I'd also like to introduce two new stars of my channel. This is my little cat, Bernie. Say hi to the channel, Bernie. She's a real sweetie. I don't remember if I have anything where she's in the video so far, but you don't know. And the other new star of my channel is this little one. Her name is Snuggles, and she's our Wiener dog. Hey Snuggles, good dog. I think I'm just gonna let her sit on my lap for the rest of the stream. She's very well behaved on camera. But anyway, on to the main subject of today's video, the Pennsylvania Railroad's K4 Class Pacific. So just for now, while I go over the details of the engine, I was going to have a couple videos from my own channel playing. This is from Train Simulator, where of course they have the Pennsylvania Railroad's K4. I have it in Trains a New Era as well, but I haven't done any videos with it yet. Anyway, here we go. The first of the K4s was built in 1914, number 1737. I'll get to a photograph of that engine later. A total of 425 were produced between 1914 and 1928. As I said, there was that one, number 1737, produced in 1914. 41 in 1917, 111 in 1918, 15 for lines west in 1919, 50 of them in 1920, 57 in 1923, 50 in 1924, 92 in 1927, and the final 8 in 1928. Numbers 5400 to 5474 were built by Baldwin, and all the other engines were home built at the Pennsylvania Railroad's Juniata shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania. In their standard configuration, they had 80-inch drivers. They were 83 feet 6 inches long, 212 tons including the tender, 140 is the engine. The usual tenders that the engines were equipped with carried 15 tons of coal and 7,000 U.S. gallons of water. They had a firebox grade area of 69.89 square feet. The boiler was pressurized 205 psi, or pounds per square inch. 27 by 28 inch cylinders. They had a top speed in excess of 80 miles an hour. Every engine was a little bit different. Some were slower and some were faster. I've heard reports of them maxing out anywhere from 75 up to about 110 miles an hour. According to the sources I could find, their horsepower was 3,286 with 44,460 pounds of force of tractive effort. Of course, all this information is in their standard configuration. Of course, there are plenty of modifications, and we'll go into those in a minute. What you're seeing on screen right now is a photo of preserved engine number 1361 at Alto Tower in Altoona, Pennsylvania, during its so far short excursion career in the 1980s. It's currently under restoration again. Hopefully the engine will be back in service soon. She's getting a new boiler, as well as a bunch of other modifications, and now she's being equipped with roller bearings, because, you have to have roller bearings now. Personally, a requirement that I disagree with, but that's for another day. So then, here's just a photograph of a couple of K4s on running commuter service, I believe, in New Jersey. This is, of course, in their post-war configuration with the headlight on top of the smoke box and the generator out front. I'll explain the difference between pre-war and post-war a little bit later. I accidentally didn't set up the hotkey for this. This is a drawing of a standard K4, of course, in its pre-war configuration. If you can see up here, the headlight's out in front and the generator is on top of the smoke box. And of course, this is just standard tender. I do know that the first engines, at least those during the 1910s, were built to be hand-fired. And then later in their lives, most engines received stokers, but not all. A lot like the L1, which I'll talk about in a different episode. Eventually, in this series, I plan to go through all of the Pennsylvania Railroad's major locomotive classes. But I decided to start with this one because this is the most well-known of them. Also, these engines are widely available for model railroaders. In fact, I have one, number 5475. I would show it, but it's in storage right now, and I can't exactly get to it right now. It's the storage up north. And I'm currently in South Carolina. By the way, this is actually my bedroom that I'm working in. My office is under renovation. Found some mold in the walls. We got to get that taken care of before I can move back in there. So I'm set up in here for now. Anyway, shall we continue? Here's number 1737, the first of the engines. The tender she was equipped with when built was standard, and also she had an oil headlight, a lot like a lot of most engines at that time on the Pennsy had oil headlights, including the first 100-something of the I-1 decapods, which you almost never see with the oil headlight. But the tender is set up for hand firing. Of course, this is a builder's photograph, not showing the engine in action. But you can see the features of the engine fairly well. Pennsylvania Railroad standard bell pair firebox, which is the square firebox up here. The tender was again standard for the Pennsylvania Railroad at that time. High headlight. They had Walschaerts valve gear as well. Please correct me if I mispronounced that. Not every railroad used Walschaerts valve gear. Notably, the Southern used their own valve gear, known logically as Southern valve gear. Anyway, shall we continue? So here is the streamlined version, which was number 3768. She was streamlined in the 1930s to be at the head end of the Broadway Limited. I'm not sure if this is the Broadway in this photograph, although it probably is, considering the lack of a baggage car. A lot of the top trains back then actually didn't carry checked baggage. That's again something I'll touch on in a later video, where I'll talk about why they didn't carry checked baggage. But it appears to be the Broadway. Of course, given the angle of the photograph, you can't completely confirm that those are sleeping cars. They could be coaches, and this could be a commuter train. I believe this is on the Rockville Bridge near Harrisburg. Even today, Harrisburg is kind of the crossroads for Norfolk Southern's system in the north. Enola Yard is across the river from Harrisburg. Sorry, I thought I just saw a bug. Anyway, shall I continue? 4 engines, numbers 11, 20, 26, 65, 36, 78, and 53, 38 were streamlined with these simpler casings. It was easier to maintain versus number 3768 here, where the casing covered the drivers. But they bear a slight resemblance to just some of the New Haven's engines. I believe it was the I-5 class on the New Haven. They do bear a slight resemblance to them. I believe that the tender on these engines were just standard tenders but streamlined. Of course, they did have water scoops for picking up water along the main line. And one of my photographs that I'm using on here is not this one. We'll get to it later, but anyway, it shows the track pans that they picked up water from. I believe that these streamlined engines were mostly used on secondary trains, although I'm not totally sure about that. I modeled the Pennsylvania Railroad, but I don't model the main line. I modeled the Elmira branch between 1910 and 1944, so nothing streamlined really came up there. Of course, there were these engines. Number 1188, which is here. This was the only engine to get the Skyline casing, as it was called. And obviously, this is pre-war. But all these modifications give the engine rather unique looks. You could recognize this engine immediately. And number 5484 seen here received counterbalanced disc drivers, which were actually a feature more common on other railroads, passenger engines like the New York Central. By the way, the Pennsylvania Railroad, they pretty much shied away from any practice that the New York Central used. Hence why there was only one of these. It was an experiment. They never built 484s or 464s, partially because those engines weren't really suited to most of the Penske's terrain. Some of the engines they built in later years, like the S1, the T1, they were just impractical for anything except the main line. As I'm also a history buff, I'm going to use a reference here. The K4s were like Sherman tanks. They were really versatile, very useful. They could be modified to suit basically any purpose, and they even made appearances on freight trains. The T1 and S1, they were like the Tiger tanks of the railroad, because they were heavy, impractical. They couldn't be used most places, and they were just so big that a lot of turntables were. There's a reason that T1 never came up the Elmira branch, even just for show. And that reason is because the turntables were too short to accommodate them. I believe the turntable at Sodas Point up on the north end on Lake Erie of the Elmira branch, they had to literally extend the rails on the turntable itself just to fit the I-1 decapods. Yes, there were some K4s that carried the coast-to-coast tender, but they weren't successful because those tenders tend to sway a lot. There's a really good book about the Pennsylvania Railroad called Set Up Running, The Life of a Pennsylvania Railroad Engine Man. It was written by the son of an engineer on the Pennsylvania. It's a very good book, and there's a section in the book that talks about when the man in question was on a fast freight run running out of Williamsport, and it was talked about how the engines with the long tenders, especially the I-1s, the tenders tended to sway a lot on the curves, and apparently it got to a point where the water tank lids were flying open at any kind of decent speed. The poor brakeman up there was being shaken about, probably getting drenched by the water coming out of the tank. And so just, imagine that, that problem on an I-1 on a freight train that's maybe going 45 miles an hour. Just imagine that that's even worse on a passenger train that may be going 70 or more. And, in realistic conditions on the main lines west of Pittsburgh, they often got up to and over 100 miles an hour. So an issue like that at that kind of speed could easily cause a derailment. Anyway, tangent over. I'm not sure when number 5484. Yeah, it's number 5484. I'm not sure when it was modified, but that's obviously a post-war configuration. Excuse me. Number 5038 is, I think, the most unique of the K4 modifications. It got these so-called elephant ear smoke deflectors along the side, and it got the stack shroud. Yeah, this was a one-off because, again, this pre-war, note the headlight. But there's also an unusual bell mounting, because usually it was on top of the tender, on top of the boiler, like you'd see in some of the other photographs I've had. And I'm guessing that they didn't continue with this because I don't even know how these affect the trajectory of the smoke. Seems kind of pointless, but anyway. And they decided not to use these on most engines because they did not want to be confused with the New York Central, who was, of course, their big competitor. Later the two merged, and it was an absolute disaster. Excuse me. Number 5399 here. Let me see. She got a booster engine mounted on the trailing truck. I'm not sure if it's visible in that photograph, but it also had a rather unique kind of, I'm not going to call it really streamlining, but you can see you can see how the walkway is, or I don't remember what that thing's called. The running board. And that gives it an appearance similar to some of the Southern Pacific's engines, like number 4449, if you've ever seen her. And I'm sure most of us have seen 4449 at some point, either in person, which unfortunately I haven't, or through documentaries or YouTube videos or whatnot. I'm not sure why they didn't continue this. Maybe it could have been because the Reading and some other roads were also using this. Sorry, I think my mouse just quit working for a second. Oh, come on, here we go. Anyway, what was I going on about? Oh yeah, the Reading used these kind of running boards, like you see them. You see them on the T1s. Or could have could have been just because, it seems like that's just another thing to get damaged and cause more headaches. If you can see those two little lines right there, those could be the sheet metal ripping from some kind of force, or maybe I don't know, sideswiped something. Maybe there was, I don't know, a sign or a grade crossing that started tipping over and the engine hit it. I don't know what caused that. This is post-war. The booster engines, they were installed on 3 engines in total, which are numbers 3676, 5399, and 5436. Boosters were also installed on some freight engines. The big problem with them, and again this is also discussed in setup running, when it was applied to an L1 class 282. By the way, they share the same boiler as the K4. But anyway, the problem was that it did provide more power, but it consumed so much steam that engines couldn't realistically supply enough steam, and I believe this is a quote from Setup Running. The steam gauge dropped as if a lead weight was affixed to it, so obviously that's not successful. And then numbers 20 and 3371, this is number 20 here, received roller bearings. And apparently now they're going to do it on the 1361, but that doesn't count for this because we're talking about them in service. You might notice fairly random numbers here. There were some series, but for the most part they numbered them randomly. So there were a few exceptions to that. Some of the K4s, like in the 5400 series. There were also the I1 class, most of which were in the 4000 series, and the M1 class 482s were in the 6700 and 6800 series, and there was 6755, which is still around. 5399, by the way, also got new poppet valves, referred to as Franklin oscillating cam poppet valves. Again, I'm not sure if you can see them in this photograph. I don't know what improvement they gave. But anyway, there's number 5436, which had stem actuated poppet valves. Or stem actuated valves, I'm not sure. I just copied this down from somewhere online. But 5436 just really looks like any other K4, other than, well, I'm not sure if that's a Mars light there. It could be if the engine was in commuter service. Any of you who have ridden even modern day commuter trains, you might notice the Mars light. Excuse me, like on Metro. And the reason they're called Mars lights was because they were originally developed by the Mars Company, which of course makes M&Ms, in Chicago. I believe that they were originally designed to alert firefighters if there was a fire at the plant, but after some grade crossings on the Burlington route, the Burlington adopted them. Other railroads started. They made their way into diesels, like, not as much modern day diesels, but E and F units, FAs, and various things that were around then, especially passenger engines like E units. The Burlington route was probably the biggest user of Mars lights, and like I said, Metra still continues to use them. I'm not sure if it's noticeable in my F40PHM-2 video, but they have Mars lights. At times they're easier to see than at others. They're really easy to see. They're really easy to see at night when they reflect off of the surrounding brush and off the track and any buildings that might be along the side of the right of way. They're also on the cab cars, by the way. I'm pretty sure the MP36s have them too. but they're also easy to notice if you're standing in front of the engine or cab car in fog, because it reflects off of the fog. And the main purpose there is to, at least in the railroad, is to warn motorists at grade crossings of an approaching train. In fact, when Amtrak had, I believe it was called the Turbo Liner, the ones that they imported from France, after a couple of grade crossing collisions, where motorists reported that they thought the turbo train was another automobile, they installed a Mars light on the turbo train. But the Mars light, eventually I'll do a specific video on that, but that's just, basic history of the Mars light. I'm not even totally sure if that's a Mars light on there, but that's what I think it is. And here is number 3847, which received a front end throttle and Franklin rotary actuated poppet valves. This was the only engine to receive this particular modification. I'm not sure if that bulge on the smoke box, I'm not sure if that's related to the front end throttle. It could be. Anyway, here a modern era train outside of my window. I live quite a distance from the tracks. In fact, I often hear Amtrak trains over in Goose Creek, which is a good maybe, 10 miles over. In fact, I think this might be Amtrak right now. But anyway, I'm not gonna waste time. And then I would say the most extensive mechanical modifications were to numbers 612, seen here, 1985, 5405, 5481, and 5484. They got 15-inch piston valves, higher steam domes and circulators, front-end throttles, and they were reclassified as the K4SA, if you know the Pennsylvania Railroad's classification system. By the way, the K4 is technically the K4S, and S, of course, stands for superheated. And then A is just first modification, like, for example, number 1223, which is class D16SB 440. Currently at the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, hopefully restored to operation sometime. I know this isn't necessarily the greatest photograph of number 612 or any of the K4SAs, but this is, just about the best I could get. It appears that the engine behind it still has an old pre-war headlight, despite this apparently being taken in 1957. But it between number 3847 and my photos and the photos I found of number 612, that bulge does appear to be related to the front end throttle. I'm not totally sure about how all that works, but that's, now we've gotten to the end of major modifications. Like I said, there were other modifications, like some engines were converted from hand firing to stoker firing, which was a relief to the firemen, of course. Because, the older engines weren't that hard to fire, like the 440s, which were in the D class, or the older 280s, like the H3 or Class R. The H6 series, H8, H9, H10 are often considered, those three are often considered the same class. And for all intents and purposes, they were. But anyway, so here in these last few slides, I've compiled some photographs showing the K4s at various points. This doesn't show a K4 in detail over here. This is actually the yard at and engine facilities at Renovo, Pennsylvania. But there were major shops there, and a lot of engines were based out of Renovo. Basically, every class except for the I-1s operated out of there. By operating, I mean that's where they were based and assigned rather than where they actually went. In fact, a lot of I-1s went here through Renovo. Anyway, Renovo is a subject for another day. This photograph in the upper right shows a pre-war K4 in charge of the secondary passenger train, the Admiral. And then your bottom right, I believe this K4 is on a commuter train somewhere in the Northeast Corridor, or what's now known as the Northeast Corridor. Back then it was just known as the Main Line. Here's some more photographs. Upper left, we're going to go clockwise from upper left. This is, of course, post-war. This was taken near Exchange Place Station in Jersey City, New Jersey, I believe. Unfortunately, that station is gone now, but there will be a version of it in the New York and Seashore route, which, by the way, is on hold for right now because, for a lot of reasons, it's a big project. Anyway, here's what looks... And the next photo is what looks like two K4s in charge, double-headed in charge of a perishables train. It was quite possible that this was during World War II, as the freight engines were constantly busy during that era. By the way, speaking of the Second World War, these engines were really worn out during the war because they were in almost constant use, especially such a versatile engine as the K4. They'd be used to pull everything from the regular passenger trains, the Broadway Limited, the name trains, locals, mixed trains on branch lines, troop trains, and other military trains, which are a separate category from troop trains. And then of course being used in freight service, as you see here. And again, they weren't the most powerful engines, given the fact they were designed in 1914. So on the really long passenger trains, like the Broadway Limited during its busier phases, they would have to be double-headed, but they had enough of them considering the electrification of the Northeast Corridor that displaced them from commuter services up on the corridor itself, that they didn't really have to worry about that. Now, of course, having the extra crew doubles the operating cost pretty much. But anyway, again, on that debate of am I on the side of the crew or the railroad, I'm on the side of the crew when it comes to the financial stuff. I'm not in favor of cost cutting because that usually ends in disaster. I nearly got injured on the job by cost cutting. I'm not going to talk about that because I'll probably get sued. But continuing, these two photographs on the bottom are both claimed to be from the Pennsylvania Reading Seashore lines, which, as its name implied, was a local merger of the Pennsylvania and Reading in southern New Jersey and out of Philadelphia. These two railroads competed vigorously for passengers, especially between Philadelphia and Atlantic City. And during the Depression, they decided to combine their operations. But a lot of the PRSL's equipment was from the Pennsylvania, and of course most of the other stuff came from the Reading. And there was other stuff that was independently ordered, by the PRSL, especially when it came to diesels. And then this last photograph on the... There goes my mouse again. Here we go. But this photo over here is of one of the K4s on the Long Island Railroad. I believe there are actually, if I'm correct, there are 3 K4s left, unless number 39 is a G5. I'll look that up real quick. Alright, Long Island 39 is a G5. Sorry about that. But the K4s were very much used on the Long Island Railroad. Long Island Railroad then was a Pennsylvania Railroad subsidiary, so the vast majority of their equipment was hand-me-down from the Pennsy. And you see that if you look at their passenger cars and their steam locomotives. When it came to diesels, they kind of went in a different direction than the Pennsy itself, and they went for Elcos, like RS3s especially. In the 60s and 70s, they bought secondhand FAs and converted them into basically cab cars before the idea of a cab car and a passenger car reached the Long Island Railroad. Apparently, we actually have one at the Illinois Railway Museum, and it's being restored back to its original configuration as an L&N, or Louisville and Nashville engine. But shall I continue? Here's that photograph I was referring to of this might be on the Long Island Railroad or the PRSL, I'm not totally sure. But it appears likely as it appears to be a commuter train. But this shows the track pans that they used. And yes, there is a water tank and water plug there. That is for the freight engines mainly. And in case you're wondering if it froze up during winter, nope. They had steam pipes running along the sides of these. I don't think, or either along the sides or under them. I don't know. But they would keep it warm even when the temperatures got really low. Over here in your upper right, this is an example of the Lines West K4. You can see the Lines West 10 there too. But this headlight configuration was extremely rare on the Pennsy. The center of the smokebox door headlight configuration was pretty much only seen on these engines as far as I know. Well, until I get to the S1, which I think had a... The S1 and maybe 3768, the fully streamlined engine. But that was more because of the streamlining than any kind of... I'm not even sure what real advantage they had for putting the engine or putting the headlights centered on the smokebox door that most railroads did. I just don't get it. Seems like you'd have a better view if you were to put them on top of the smoke box or out in front, or just generally higher headlights. And it's something that I've noticed personally at the Illinois Railway Museum. We don't have any operating steam engines that have a high headlight, but the diesels that we have are diesels that have high mounted headlights, actually provide a better field of vision at night than say the 1630s center smoke box door mounted headlights. But anyway, headlight tangent over. Sorry about this little dog. She must be smelling my dinner, which is over off to the side. Anyway, just here's just a standard run of the mill K4. It looks like it's in an engine terminal. Bottom right is, I'm not sure what train this is, but it appears to be a secondary train. You got the railway post office, the baggage car, and then a few coaches behind it. This last photograph on this page right next to me, it's just a standard K4 on a commuter run on the corridor, or the main line. Here's another K4, and this seems to be one of the earlier engines. Well, not as in really early, because obviously it has the electric headlight. But you see the line tender, and that's really what gives me the idea of its age. I believe that's number 5495. Here's a modern era photograph of number 3750, which is one of the two preserved engines. The other one is, of course, 1361. And despite the appearance in this photograph, 3750 is not operational. She's on display at the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, as far as I know. Hopefully one day we'll see 3750 and 1361 team up. That's one of my, honestly, one of my lifelong dreams, is to see those two together. Anyway, I think that's 1361 down there. I don't remember exactly. Here's another view of those, of one of the semi-streamlined engines. And this one, you really get the impression of the SP engines on this one. Here's our second to last page of photographs. The last page isn't going to have me on it. It's just going to be a large view. Here's another unusual headlight configuration. Note how most engines had the keystone number plate, but this one didn't. This might have been a branch line engine. Could have been anything, or maybe it was just, could have just been modified for some kind of event. But this is not a standard K4. However, on the right, which is number 3863, I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this is a standard K4 with a standard tender, and this shows the engine being serviced. And it perhaps shows and over here perhaps shows the reason why they decided to switch the mounting of the generator and headlight post-war. Personally, I like the engines in their pre-war configuration. It just looks better to me. But anyway, here's number 1361 when she was on display at Horseshoe Curve. Just a minute, Bernie. Sorry about that. Down here on the bottom, there's a couple of K4s. Just some random photos. And then our last page here, which is the conclusion. We've pretty much reached the end of the live stream now of this episode. I believe this is number 3850 in post-war configuration with a commuter train at Hazlitt, New Jersey. Apparently it's 54. Well, it says the caption says it's 5473, but it looks like 3850. But anyway, this is at a location known as Homer Hill in Hazlitt, New Jersey, which is on the modern-day North Jersey coastline, which was jointly operated with the Jersey Central. And one day I'll talk about that. But anyway, so we've, we've kind of reached the end of our live stream now, or I mean, this episode of the Inspection Pit. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again on the next one. Have a good day.